Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be reading the first 3 chapters of Goosebumps The Haunted Mask. Now I know you're thinking, Joe, you made a poll about audiobook in FNAF 1. Why are you doing Goosebumps? And that's because I want you to see my reaction. And you see, I've read a bunch of FNAF books, so you wouldn't see my actual reaction. So I was just going to read this one first, okay? So without further ado, let's get started. I'm just going to be reading the first 3 chapters. Chapter 1. What are you going to be for Halloween? Sabrina Mason asked. She moved her fork around in the bright yellow macaroni on her lunch tray, but didn't take a bite. Carly Beth Caldwell sighed and shook her head. The overhead light on the lunchroom ceiling made her straight brown hair gleam. I don't know, a witch maybe. Sabrina's mouth dropped open. You, a witch? Well, why not? Carly Beth demanded, staring across the long table at her friend. I thought you were afraid of witches, Sabrina replied. She raised a fork full of macaroni into her mouth and started to chew. This macaroni is made of rubber, she complained, chewing hard. Remind me to start packing a lunch. I am not afraid of witches, Carly Beth insisted, her dark eyes flashing angrily. You just think I'm a big scaredy cat, don't you? Sabrina giggled. Yes. She flipped her black ponytail behind her shoulders with a quick toss of her head. Hey, don't eat the macaroni. Really, Carly Beth, it's gross. She reached across the table to keep Carly Beth from raising her fork. But I'm starving, Carly Beth complained. The lunchroom grew crowded and noisy. At the next table, a group of 5th grade boys were tossing a half-full milk carton back and forth. Carly Beth saw Chuck Greeny ball up a bright red fruit roll-up and shove the whole sticky thing in his mouth. Yuck, she made a disgusted face at him, then turned back to Sabrina. I am not a scaredy cat, Sabrina, just because everybody picks on me and Carly Beth. What about last week? Remember, at my house? Sabrina ripped open a bag of tortilla chips and offered some across the table to her friend. You mean the ghost thing? Carly Beth replied. That was really stupid. But you believed it, Sabrina said, with a mouthful of chips. You really believed my attic was haunted. You should have seen the look on your face when the ceiling started to creak and we heard footsteps up there. That was so mean, Carly Beth complained, rolling her eyes. And then when you heard the footsteps coming down the stairs, your face went all white and you screamed, Sabrina recalled. It was only Chuck and Steve. You know I'm afraid of ghosts, Carly Beth said, blushing. And snakes, and bugs, and loud noises, and dark rooms, and witches, Sabrina declared. I don't see why you have to make fun of me, Carly Beth pouted. She shoved her lunch tray away. I don't see why everyone always thinks it's so much fun to try and scare me. Even you, my best friend. I'm sorry, Sabrina said sincerely. She reached across the table and squeezed Carly Beth's wrist reassuringly. You're just so easy to scare. It's hard to resist. Here, you want some more chips? She shoved the bag toward Carly Beth. Maybe I'll scare you someday, Carly Beth threatened. Her friend laughed. No way. Carly Beth continued to pout. She was 11, but she was tiny. And with her round face and sort of stub of a nose, which she hated and wished would grow longer, she looked much younger. Sabrina, on the other hand, was tall, dark, and sophisticated looking. She had straight black hair tied behind her head in a ponytail and enormous dark eyes. Everyone who saw them together assumed that Sabrina was 12 or 13, but actually Carly Beth was a month older than her friend. Maybe I won't be a witch, Carly Beth said thoughtfully, resting her chin on her hand. Maybe I'll be a disgusting monster with hanging eyeballs and green slime dripping down my face, and a loud crash made Carly Beth scream. It took her a few seconds to realize it was just a lunch tray hitting the floor. She turned to see Gabe Mosier, his face bright red, drop to his knees and starts to I can't speak today, scooping his lunch off the floor. The lunchroom rang out with cheers and applause. Carly Beth hunched down in her seat, embarrassed that she had screamed. Her breathing had just returned to normal when a strong hand grabbed her shoulder from behind. Carly Beth's shriek echoed through the room. Chapter 2. She heard laughter at another table. Someone yelled, "Way to go, Steve!" She whipped her head around to see her friend Steve Boswell standing behind her, a mischievous grin on his face. "Gotcha," he said, letting go of her shoulder. Steve pulled out the chair next to Carly Beth's and lowered himself over its back. His best friend, Chuck Greeny, slammed his book bag onto the table and sat down next to Sabrina. Chuck and Steve looked so much alike. They could have been brothers. Both were tall and thin, with straight brown hair, which they usually hid under baseball caps. Both had dark brown eyes and goofy grins. Both wore faded blue jeans and dark-colored long-sleeve T-shirts. And both of them loved to scare Carly Beth, and they loved to startle her and make her jump and shriek. They spent hours dreaming up of new ways to frighten her. She vowed every single time that she would never fall for one of their stupid tricks again. So far, they had won every time. Carly Beth always threatened to pay them back, but in the time they'd been friends, she hadn't been able to think of anything good enough. Chuck reached for a few remaining chips in Sabrina's bag. She playfully slapped his hand away. "Get your own." Steve held a crinkled hunk of aluminum foil under Carly Beth's nose. "Want a sandwich?" "I don't want it." Carly Beth sniffed at it suspiciously. What kind is it? I'm starving." "It's a turkey sandwich. Here," Steve said, handing it to Carly Beth. "It's too dry. My mom forgot the mayo. You want it?" "Yeah, sure, thanks," Carly Beth explained. I can't speak today for some reason. Exclaimed. She took the sandwich from him and peeled back the aluminum foil. Then she took a big bite of the sandwich. She started to chew and realized that both Chuck and Steve were staring at her with big grins on their faces. Something tasted funny, kind of sticky and sour. Carly Beth stopped chewing. Chuck and Steve were laughing now. Sabrina looked confused. Carly Beth uttered a disgusted groan and spit the chewed-up sandwich hunk onto a napkin. Then she pulled the bread apart and saw a big brown worm resting on top of the turkey. Golly, bro. Right on top of the turkey. Oh! With a moan, she covered her face with her hands. The room erupted with laughter, cruel laughter. I ate a worm. I'm going to be sick," Carly Beth groaned. She jumped to her feet and stared at Steve angrily. I'm sorry. She jumped to her feet and stared angrily at Steve. "How could you?" she demanded. "It's not funny. It isn't a real worm," Chuck said. Steve was laughing too hard to talk. "Huh?" Carly Beth gazed down at it and felt a wave of nausea rise up from her stomach. It isn't real. It's rubber. Pick it up, Chuck urged. Carly Beth hesitated. All the kids all through the vast room were whispering and pointing at her and laughing. Go ahead. It isn't real. Pick it up, Chuck said, grinning. Carly Beth reached down with 2 fingers and picked the brown worm from the sandwich. It felt warm and sticky. Gotcha again, Chuck said with a laugh. It was real. It's a real worm. With a horrified cry, Carly Beth tossed the worm at Chuck, who was laughing wildly. Then she leaped away from the table, knocking the chair over. As the chair clattered noisily against the hard floor, Carly Beth covered her mouth and ran gagging from the lunchroom. I can still taste it, she thought. I can still taste the worm in my mouth. I'll pay them back for this, Carly Beth thought bitterly as she ran. I'll pay them back. I really will. As she pushed through the double doors and hurtled towards the girls' room, the cruel laughter followed her across the hall. Chapter 3. After school, Carly Beth hurried through the halls without talking to anyone. She heard kids laughing and whispering. She knew they were laughing at her. Word had spread all over the school that Carly Beth Caldwell had eaten a worm at lunch. Carly Beth, the scary cat. Carly Beth, who was frightened of her own shadow. Carly Beth, who was so easy to trick. Chuck and Steve had sneaked a real worm, a fat brown worm, into a sandwich, and Carly Beth had taken a big bite. What a jerk. Carly Beth ran all the way home, 3 long blocks. Her anger grew with every step. How could they do that to me? They're supposed to be my friends. Why do they think it's so funny to scare me? She burst into the house, breathing hard. Anybody home? She called, stopping in the hallway and leaning against the banister to catch her breath. Her mother hurried out from the kitchen. Carly Beth, hi, what's wrong? I ran all the way, Carly Beth told her, pulling off her blue windbreaker. Why? Miss Caldwell asked. Just felt like it, Carly Beth replied moodily. Her mother took Carly Beth's windbreaker and hung it in the front of the closet for her. Then she brushed a hand affectionately through Carly Beth's soft brown hair. Where'd you get the straight hair? She muttered. Her mother was always saying that. You don't look like mother and daughter at all, Carly Beth realized. Her mother was a tall, chubby woman with thick curls of coppery hair and lively gray-green eyes. She was extremely energetic, seldom stood still. I don't know what that says. And talked as rapidly as she moved. Today, she was wearing a paint-stained gray sweatshirt over black lycra tights. Why so grumpy? Miss Caldwell asked. Anything you'd like to talk about? Carly Beth shook her head. Not really. She didn't feel like telling her mother that she'd become the laughing stock of Walnut Avenue Middle School. Come here. I have something to show you, Miss Caldwell said, tugging Carly Beth toward the living room. I'm really not in the mood, Mom, Carly Beth told her, hanging back. Come on, her mother insisted, and pulled her across the hallway. Carly Beth always found it impossible to argue with her mother. She was like a hurricane sweeping everything in her location. Look, Mrs. Caldwell declared, grinning and gesturing to the mantelpiece. Carly Beth followed her mother's gaze to the mantel and cried out in surprise. It's a head! Oh God, that's... I don't... Why does her mother have a head? Not just any head. Miss Caldwell began beaming. Go look. Go on, take a closer look. No. If I was Carly Beth, I'd be calling the cops. Carly Beth took a few steps toward the mantelpiece. Well, I lost my freaking... Carly Beth took a few steps toward the mantelpiece, her eyes on the head staring back at her. It took her a few moments to recognize the straight brown hair, the brown eyes, the short snip of a nose, the round cheeks. It's me, she cried, walking up to it. Yes, life size, Miss Caldwell declared. I just came from my art class at the museum. I finished it today. What do you think? Carly Beth picked it up and studied it closely. It looks just like me, Mom. Really? What's it made of? Plaster of Paris, her mother replied, taking it from Carly Beth and holding it up so that Carly Beth was face to face, eye to eye with herself. You have to be careful. It's delicate. It's hollow, see? Carly Beth stared intently at the head, peering into her own eyes. It's kind of creepy, she muttered. You mean because I did such a good job? Her mother demanded. It's just creepy, that's all, Carly Beth said. She forced herself to look away from the replica of herself and saw that her mother's smile had faded. Miss Caldwell looked hurt. Don't you like it? Yeah, sure. It's really good, Mom, Carly Beth answered quickly. But I mean, why on earth did you make it? Because I love you, Miss Caldwell replied. Why else? Honestly, Carly Beth, you have the strangest reaction to things. I worked really hard on this sculpture. I'm really sorry, Mom. I like it. I really do, Carly Beth insisted. It was just a surprise, that's all. It's great. It looks just like me. I had a bad day, that's all. Carly Beth took another look at the sculpture. Its brown eyes, her brown eyes, stared back at her. The brown hair shimmered in the afternoon sunlight through the window. It smiled at me, Carly Beth thought, her mouth dropping open. I saw it. I just saw it smile. No, it had to be a trick of light. It was a plaster of Paris head, she reminded herself. Don't go scaring yourself over nothing, Carly Beth. Haven't you made a big enough fool of yourself today? Thanks for showing it to me, Mom, she said awkwardly, pulling her eyes away. She forced a smile. 2 heads are better than 1, right? Right, Miss Caldwell agreed brightly. Incidentally, Carly Beth, your duck costume is all ready. I put it on your bed. Huh? Duck costume? You saw a duck costume at the mall, remember? Miss Caldwell carefully placed the sculpted head on the mantel. The one with the feathers and everything? You thought it would be funny to be a duck this Halloween, so I made you a duck costume. All right, Carly Beth said, her mind spinning. Do I really want to be a stupid duck this Halloween? She thought. I'll go up and take a look at it, Mom. Thanks. I still thought it was what she was thinking. Carly Beth had forgotten all about the duck costume. I want to be a cute duck this Halloween, she thought as she climbed the stairs to her room. I want to be scary. She had seen some really scary-looking masks in the window of a new party store that had opened a few blocks from school. One of them she knew would be perfect. But now she'd have to walk around in feathers and have everyone quack at her. And have everyone quack at... That makes no sense. And make fun of her. It wasn't fair. Why did her mother have to listen to every word she said? Just because Carly Beth admired a duck costume in a store didn't mean she wanted to be a stupid duck for Halloween. Carly Beth hesitated outside her bedroom. The door had been closed for some reason. She never closed the door. She listened carefully. She thought she heard someone breathing on the other side of the door. Someone or something. The breathing grew louder. Carly Beth pressed an ear to the door. What was in her room? There was only one way to find out. Carly Beth pulled open the door and heard a startled cry. Alright, so that was the first 3 chapters of Goosebumps the Haunted Mask. Again, I'm only doing Goosebumps even though FNAF won the poll, because I've read a lot of FNAF books that I have, and I want you to get my reaction. So hope you enjoyed this. So now it's time for a review. Hey, so review the first chapter. I believe they did a good job on explaining like what Carly Beth and Sabrina looked like. I think it could have been a bit longer, but yeah. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is my favorite. She ate a worm. Yeah. Yeah, but overall pretty good. I think overall all 3 chapters were pretty good. Yeah, I hope you all have a good day. And thank you for listening to the very first audiobook I have ever made. See ya.